We're in Pirkei Avot, second parak, Mishna 7. It says like this: Af hu ra'a gulgolet achat shetzafa al pnei hamayim. Amar la, al da teft atfuch, v'sof mitifayach yetufun. And the translation that I found on Sefaria, it's a good translation, it explained, or translated, moreover, he, i.e. Hillel, saw a skull floating on the face of the water. He said to it, because you drowned others, they drowned you, and in the end, they that drowned you will be drowned. And Rambam here says that the meaning is that evil actions will come back to haunt those who did them. Right? Not even haunt them, it'll come back to those who actually did them. And Rambam sometimes quotes from Tehillim and from Mishna and from the Gemara in order to prove that this is a concept that we see elsewhere in Torah literature. And moreover, Rambam says that this happens at every moment, in every time period, and in every place. This is a universal concept, and in fact we see it in other cultures. You can call it whatever you want. The common name is karma, right? This is eventually going to come back to bite you. If you do something negative, then that negativity, or negativity in general, is going to come back to you, because that's what you deserve. You put out negative energy into the universe, and you better believe that that's going to come spinning right back around like a boomerang. And moreover, this whole idea of negativity, and Rambam specifically says that if you create some new evil, then that specific new evil will be visited upon you. And we actually see that this is a theme of Purim. Now, Rav Bernstein quotes the Yosef Lekach. The Yosef Lekach, it's a work that was written on the Megillah as a perush. It was written about 400 years ago by the same author as the Maseh Hashem. And Maseh Hashem, first it's amazing. It was the basis for the Vilna Gaon's and the Malbim's commentaries on the Haggadah. And what the Yosef Lekach points out is, it's interesting to take a much closer look at the first parak of the Megillah, because there's a lot going on, and it's certainly possible to miss many details. And so here's what the Yosef Lekach says. At the end of the parak, right, at the end of the first chapter of the Megillah, Achashverosh has to deal with Vashti, right, and Vashti's refusal, and he's not sure how to proceed. So you see, the puzzle goes into quite a fair amount of detail in terms of Achashverosh summoned his ministers, and they named 7 of them, and he has all these committees, and he's not sure what to do, and he has to consult with them, figure out how to deal with this problem that he has. And Memuchan, that's Haman, speaks up and says, I have an amazing solution. You can issue a Dvar Malchut, a royal decree. It's this new invention, King Achashverosh, that will permit you to effectively bypass all these committees, i.e. if something affects you, if something affects the king, then issue a Dvar Malchut, right, a royal decree that allows you to bypass all these committees, and you can just go and execute your new law immediately, effective immediately, right? And that's an amazing invention, Achashverosh, and you should do that now. Now, Achashverosh, you could imagine, maybe he's not so sure, but then once he uses it, he's flexing these Dvar Malchut muscles, and he likes it. He doesn't need to ask anyone. He could do whatever he wants. He's the king. Now, what Haman was hoping to use this for was obviously for his own benefit, i.e. he used this to threaten the Jewish people. In terms of Achashverosh, you can just imagine Achashverosh has to convince all of his committees and his ministers to wipe out one of his people for no real reason. That's bound to make some other minorities nervous in his kingdom. You know, the king decides to target one minority one day, it might not be so great for his kingdom. And so his ministers may have opposed it, the committees may have opposed it. But again, of course, Achashverosh, with this new Dvar Malchut that Haman gave Achashverosh, well, he doesn't have to ask anyone. He just bypasses immediately and can execute his plans and enact these laws. Now, what's funny about this, again, funny to us, maybe not to Haman, is Haman eventually suffered because of this Dvar Malchut. On the second night, the second Mishna that Esther threw for Achashverosh and Haman, Achashverosh is obviously very angry at Haman, and in the midst of all this, Chervona kind of pipes up and says, hey, you see those gallows, Achashverosh, that Haman had built? Yeah, Haman had that built to hang Mordechai. Asher Diber Tov al Melech. Achashverosh, Haman wants to hang your friend, Mordechai, who actually tried to help you and saved your life, in fact. So what does Achashverosh do? Looks at Haman, hang him. Dvar Malchut. This concerns me, Achashverosh, and so Haman is threatening me and my friends, and off the gallows with you, and you're going to get hanged. and there was nothing that anyone could do, and there were no committees that could be spoken to because Achashverosh had this Svar Malchut in his pocket that was given to him by Haman. Because just imagine, if Achashverosh had to go back again to the committees and the ministers, Haman himself had been part of these people for many, many years. And so chances are, Haman may have been able to kind of weasel his way out of it because the other ministers would have spoken Achashverosh out of this. It's too drastic. Maybe you could punish him, but some other way. But Haman now ends up getting hanged because of his own energy that he put out in the world. Haman gave Achashverosh the Dvar Malchut to kill the Jews, and that Dvar Malchut came right back to Haman and ended up killing him. And so we see, if one creates new negative energy, right, some kind of new creative way of doing something evil, it's eventually going to come bite that person right back. It's going to trigger back like a boomerang. It might take years, but it eventually will. And Rambam here is taken into a positive direction. He says that this is not only true for negative actions, but even for positive ones. He says, that even anyone who teaches an elevated concept, who's mechadesh an action that is positive among positive actions. And I think perhaps the reason why he says tov mina tovot instead of just tov is because it's good to give charity. It's not good to give charity out of stealing. If you're stealing, stop stealing. Don't give charity out of your stealing. This isn't the direction we're hoping to go for. So Rambam here is saying tov mina tovot. Give charity from that which you rightfully worked for and earned. That's just one example. So what does Rambam say? Yagieu to'elet hapu'alahu. Right? So that same person who put in that the positive energy, those good actions are going to come right back around and serve that same person. And again, it may be years, and there are many stories of this person who's suffering difficulties. His grandfather was a great man, and he really helped his family, and that family is really struggling, and then the grandson isn't entirely sure what to do, or granddaughter, or whichever, and then it happens to be that the person they're asking for help with, their employer, their friend, their whoever, is a descendant of the recipient of that kindness, and it kind of effectively that kindness goes around. That's exactly the point, right? That's exactly the point. If you may not feel the fruit of your labors or your kindnesses immediately, but it'll eventually come back to benefit you. You can imagine a person who's sacrificing a lot to try to make a neighborhood safer may get a lot of backlash at the beginning, but you can see how as the effects and ramifications of that positivity spins through generations, then he might end up living in a much, much safer, happier, nicer neighborhood than he otherwise would have, just because of that positive energy he put in. Fine. Now, what Rambam, by saying this, he's actually teaching us two things. First, that doing good actually does help you in the end, ultimately, as we just said. And moreover, that you're a teacher, right? He says, V'chen kol hamelamed ma'ala. He teaches a positive, elevated concept. Because often we think of teachers, they're professors, or they're high school teachers, or they're in some formal role as a teacher. And Rambam says, the fact that a person acts makes him a teacher. If a person decides to speed, then he's teaching other people that's okay to speed. Right? If a person does anything that's negative, then those actions will help push people into a certain direction. But it's not only a negative direction, it's also a positive direction. If a person ends up doing something positive, then that could really affect other people. And I'll give one example. I remember I went to my Rebbe's house over by Hurwitz, and I went there a lot, and I was there one Shabbat, and I go into my room, to my guest bed, and lo and behold, right on the guest bed, I can't remember if it was on the pillow or whatnot, but it was a small plate of freshly baked cookies. Now, it's a small action, but it made me feel really good. It was just a very warm environment. It was like, it's pretty geschmack to get these new freshly baked cookies to look forward to. You know that there's good food coming, but you have your own little snack should you want more at either before Shabbat or after when you go to bed or in the morning or whatever it is that you do. But it was there for me. And so actually me and my wife did this for another couple that we were hosting who was in town. And they're like, this is awesome. We need to implement this into our own hosting. And it was amazing. I learned from my Rebbe, that affected me, and then I did it for someone else, and it affected them. And moreover, me and my wife ended up going to that couple's house a year or two later, something like that, and lo and behold, we walk into their place, and what do we see? We see a paper with the wireless network to connect to, and the password right there without us even asking. It was just there. In addition to a bunch of phone chargers. There were iPhone chargers. There were old iPhone chargers and new iPhone chargers, I believe. The new ones for sure, but I can't remember if they had the old ones. I'm assuming they did. They had Samsung chargers, and they had multiple of them because who knows? You can't just have one. Maybe both me and my wife would need to charge our phones. So they had at least 4 or 5. And moreover, they had a new toothbrushes. They had toothpaste. They had mouthwash with little cups, so that you could just, instead of polluting it for everyone else, you could just put it in your cup. And it was just so thoughtful and creative. It was just all of your needs were met the instant you walked in. You better believe that when I saw that, I was like, this is an amazing idea. I could implement this in my own home. And so we see that the creativity with which a person can start thinking up these new kindnesses will affect other people. And I'll leave off with a thought I read, actually learned with my father this past Rosh Hashanah, and it's really a really powerful idea, and it's sourced in Rav Bernstein's Teshuva sefer, which is on Elul and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and briefly Sukkot, and it's chapter 27. So the book is called Teshuva, chapter 27, the Zichronot, deeds and fruits. And so Rav Bernstein is talking about this idea of what does it mean? Atah zocher maseh olam, right? God remembers the deeds of the world. What does that mean? So just cutting out specifically to our text, he quotes a pasuk in Yirmiyah. The pasuk says, "Asher einecha pkuchot al darchei bnei Adam, latet leish kedrachav vechepri me'alelav." For your, capital Y, God, for your eyes are vigilant upon the ways of man, to give each person in accordance with his ways and the fruits of his deeds. Now, a person asks, a person's ways are the fruits of his deeds. What does that mean? How are these two different things? Why does the pasuk seem to reference two things literally right after one and the other? I can't give an example, but the idea is these are synonyms, seemingly. So Rabbi Yeshua Heller says like this: those aren't quite the same thing. A person's rachav, ways, and prima adarav are not the same. Now, how does that mean? An action not only stands alone, right, in terms of fresh plate of cookies, Wi-Fi password, however else, what other examples I'm sure that you could think of, but it also exerts influence on other people. Just like we said, right, I went to my Rebbe's, I saw these cookies, and that influenced me, and I ended up influencing other people, and it could just keep going on, further and further and further. So it's true that a person has certain ways, but those ways may have faded from the world, right? And when a person dies, then that's it. But other people remember what that person did, right, for the positive or the negative, and that could influence further positive or chas v'shalom, further negative behavior. And that's the lesson that we learn from our Mishna. Again, it's if you drown someone will drown you, and don't think it ends there. The people who ended up drowning you will in turn get drowned. This isn't just kind of the buck stops with me, and there's going to be no further negativity because I'm going to be so strong. There will eventually be someone stronger or more aggressive or more ruthless or more cruel or someone who you feel a particular amount of sympathy with, and so they'll end up taking advantage of you. There are endless range of permutations that we can see this. And I think this is an important point in our times in particular, because we live in such cynical times when people are like, why do anything nice? What are you going to benefit? You act honorably, and what happens? Everyone pointing out like, that guy's honorable. He's naive. That's not the way the world works, right? This person doesn't know. You have to be hard, and you have to cheat a little bit. And there's all these negative reactions. People profit from being doing not great things, not wholesome things. And it's important to keep the long term in mind in terms of, yes, right now he might look like he's doing great, but in the end, that evil is going to come right back to him. And as an example, I don't know much about this developer, but I can just imagine the developer of the condo in Miami that collapsed. He perhaps was a high flyer, right? He was probably looked very successful. He's a real estate developer. Look at all these cool projects he's doing. And now it's true he's passed away, but that condo collapsed and ended up killing 100+ people. I have a pretty good sense that person's name is no longer so well thought of. And again, that person's evil came, again, we can't judge, we don't know exactly what happened, but chances are people have looked into this and it doesn't look like there were such positive things going on with what he was doing. And then ended up biting him in terms of, yes, it certainly looked like he was cool at the beginning, but at the end, it just came back to bite him. As opposed to people who do positive things. Yes, maybe for years he's unappreciated, but eventually, and this may happen after his death, after his passing, but people start being like, that guy, he was a real inspiration for me. And that's the idea that we're meant to pull out from here, an important one for our cynical times. All right.